stories beyond imagination.
What is this place?
Get back!
It started with a flicker in the static, a radio echo no one was supposed to hear. Antarctica's frozen heart had always been silent, a place where the wind howled louder than any machine in ice swallowed all signs of life. But in the dead of winter, the Amundsen Scott Research Station received something impossible, a pulse repeating every 60 seconds, faint yet deliberate. Dr. Kira Bennett, chief geophysicist, stared at the spectrogram on her monitor, her breath fogging in the frigid air. The signal wasn't random. It carried structure, like a language stripped of its words. Her colleagues dismissed it as interference, a reflection from satellites overhead. But Kira knew better. The frequency wasn't bouncing from the sky. It was rising from beneath 2 miles of ice. She replayed it over and over until it felt less like a noise and more like a heartbeat, a secret, waiting to be uncovered. Word traveled fast. Within a week, the anomaly drew the attention of international agencies and covert military branches. Files marked classified stamped their way across desks in Washington, Moscow, and Beijing. Satellite scans revealed something astonishing. The signal wasn't just a blip. It was synchronized with magnetic pulses traveling outward, like sonar from a beacon buried deep in the continent's crust. For a moment, the world's most powerful nations shared a singular thought. Someone, or something, had left a message frozen under Antarctica. Kira's inbox flooded with orders and threats disguised as invitations. Finally, she was summoned to lead a multinational expedition, under the guise of a climate research project. The truth was simpler and more dangerous. They were going to drill into the oldest, coldest ice on Earth, to answer a call humanity was never meant to hear. The expedition launched at dawn, their convoy of tracked vehicles groaning across endless plains of snow. Helicopters ferried in supplies, and satellites tracked their every step, though they were officially off-grid. Kira rode in the lead crawler, her fingers wrapped around a notebook, where she'd sketched the signal's patterns. The ice stretched infinite, featureless, yet beneath it she imagined vast halls of steel and fire hidden for millennia. The team consisted of scientists, engineers, and armed escorts wearing uniforms with no insignia. Their silence was louder than the engines. By night, tents glowed like fragile lanterns against the Antarctic dark, their walls rattling under shrieking winds. The further they pressed inland, the more Kira felt the weight of something watching from below. The signal grew stronger. It was no longer just sound, it was pressure, thrumming in her chest like the pulse of a colossal heart. After weeks of drilling, the team finally pierced through 2 miles of ancient ice. What emerged wasn't a pocket of air or trapped water, it was metal. The drill bit struck something smooth, harder than titanium, and resonant. It rang like a bell that echoed through the camp, vibrating the very ground beneath their boots. Everyone froze, listening to the strange hum bleeding from the core sample. Kira touched the shard with gloved hands, her skin prickling. The alloy wasn't listed in any database, yet it bore markings. Straight lines, sharp angles, patterns too precise for nature. "It's a structure," she whispered. The camp descended into frantic energy. Tents became labs. Data streamed to satellites overhead, and beneath it all the signal pulsed louder, as if welcoming them. Tap, tap, pause, tap. The ice wasn't hiding geology. It was guarding a doorway. The deeper they drilled, the stranger things became. Equipment failed without reason. Compasses spun wildly, and at night, some swore they heard whispers in the wind, voices speaking in broken English, words that made no sense. When the borehole finally broke into a hollow cavity, cameras were lowered inside. The feed revealed a cavern the size of a cathedral, its walls lined with smooth black metal, shimmering under floodlights. At the center rose a spire, perfectly symmetrical, glowing faintly blue as if alive. Gasps filled the control tent. The spire wasn't just emitting the signal, it was powering up. Awakened by their intrusion, data streamed in, faster than they could process. The cavern had been sealed for millions of years, yet the machinery inside still functioned flawlessly. Kira felt both awe and dread crawl through her veins. They hadn't just discovered a structure, they had awakened something waiting for them beneath the frozen sky. The discovery electrified the world's hidden corridors of power. Governments demanded answers. Corporations licked their lips at the thought of limitless energy, and the military eyed the technology as the ultimate weapon. But down at the ice camp, the mood was very different. The cavern wasn't just a find, it was a problem wrapped in silence. The spire pulsed louder each day, flooding their instruments with data, yet no one could translate it. Attempts to cut deeper into the metal walls failed. Drills snapped, plasma torches sputtered out. The alloy resisted everything. Some of the soldiers wanted to plant explosives to break their way in, but Kira stopped them. She argued that the structure wasn't locked against them. It was locked for them, waiting for a key they didn't yet understand. Every decision carried weight. To treat this as discovery was one thing. To treat it as conquest was something far more dangerous. And above them, the storm season rolled in, trapping them under skies that never slept. Kira's nights became sleepless. She pored over reams of data, listening to the endless pulse that filled her tent. Tap, tap, pause, tap. Sometimes she thought she could hear words in it, whispers hidden in rhythm, but when she replayed it, the sounds dissolved back into noise. Her team began fracturing under the pressure. The engineers argued that the energy signature could power entire cities for centuries if they could harness it. The soldiers reminded everyone that hostile nations were watching, satellites scanning their every move. And the scientists? They started fearing. What if the structure wasn't abandoned? What if it was a prison? Their arguments echoed into the frozen night, muffled but sharp. And through it all, Kira felt the growing certainty that they hadn't discovered the spire by accident. Something wanted them to find it. The problem was no longer just unlocking it. The problem was surviving what came after. Strange phenomena began to spread across the camp. Batteries drained in seconds. Wristwatches ticked backward, and men reported shadows moving across the ice with no light to cast them. One soldier awoke screaming, his skin blistered with frostbite despite never leaving the heated tents. Another swore he saw figures standing at the cavern's edge, tall, thin, draped in shimmering frost. Yet when patrols searched, nothing was there. Fear gnawed at discipline. The soldiers began sleeping with weapons close at hand, while the scientists locked themselves away with data that refused to make sense. Kira watched her team unravel, their faces pale under LED lamps, their eyes hollowed by dread. The spire kept pulsing, louder, faster, almost like a heartbeat rising into panic. She realized the greatest challenge wasn't drilling into the structure, it was keeping her people from tearing each other apart before they even got inside. Messages crackled through encrypted channels. Washington demanded progress. Moscow issued veiled threats about sovereignty in Antarctica. Beijing sent its own research team, now camped only miles away on the opposite ridge. The ice desert had become a battlefield of silence. Three superpowers staring at each other through white storms, waiting for someone to make the first mistake. Drones hovered constantly overhead, their lenses glinting like watching eyes. In the middle of it all, Kira stood as reluctant mediator, forced to balance scientific truth with political lies. She knew the spire didn't belong to any one nation. It belonged to humanity, if it belonged at all. But try explaining that to men with guns and governments with ambitions. Each day the pressure grew. Each day the signal screamed louder through her instruments. She began to wonder, was the spire warning them, or calling reinforcements from somewhere far worse? By the fourth week, the expedition was barely holding together. Sleep deprivation, fear, and paranoia turned colleagues into strangers. One engineer quit entirely, demanding evacuation before the ice swallowed us whole. The military commander, Colonel Reeves, accused Kira of withholding information, convinced she understood more than she admitted. Tensions exploded in a midnight confrontation. Soldiers standing in the snow with rifles raised. Scientists screaming about sanity and science. Only Kira's desperate pleas prevented bloodshed. She realized then, the true challenge wasn't just decoding the signal or unlocking the spire. It was leadership. If she failed to hold them together, the entire mission would collapse into chaos. And in that chaos, she feared the spire would not remain silent. Because each time they argued, each time fear spread, the cavern seemed to hum louder, as though feeding on their conflict, growing stronger with every human fracture. The breakthrough came by accident. During a violent storm, when the generators overloaded and the camp blacked out, the spire surged with light. Blue veins of energy rippled across the cavern walls, revealing seams that had been invisible before. The structure wasn't solid, it was a door, its outlines now glowing faintly in the gloom. Kira's breath fogged as she realized it had been waiting for the right conditions to show them the way in. When the power returned, the glow vanished, but the discovery changed everything. They shifted focus from drilling to deciphering the patterns of the pulses. With every cycle, the spire responded differently, almost like a lock adjusting to the right key. Reeves demanded explosives again, but Kira overruled him. "If this thing has survived millions of years untouched," she argued, "you won't break it open with dynamite. You'll just wake it up angry." Her words silenced even the soldiers. No one liked the implication that the spire could be alive. After days of recalibrating instruments, the team discovered the pulses weren't random. They were invitations. When the sequence was replayed at higher frequency and directed back at the spire, the cavern shuddered. The seams along the wall flared open with light, and a section of the metal slid back soundlessly, revealing a tunnel that plunged downward into darkness. A blast of air hissed out, warmer than the ice above, filled with a sterile metallic tang. Kira and her team stared into the opening, their faces pale with awe and fear. Reeves ordered an armed squad to go first, but Kira insisted on joining. She felt the same pull she had when she first heard the signal. It wasn't curiosity, it was compulsion, like gravity dragging her into orbit. As their headlamps flickered on and they stepped inside, the door sealed silently behind them. For the first time in human history, people had set foot inside a machine older than civilization itself. The interior was a labyrinth of steel corridors, impossibly preserved, humming with low vibrations that seemed to pass directly through bone. Walls gleamed with a sheen no dust could dull, and geometric patterns glowed faintly under their lights. Some resembled circuitry. Others seemed like constellations, star maps etched into metal. The air was breathable, though unnaturally still, and carried a faint ozone scent. Cameras recorded everything, beams slicing through shadows as the squad moved in formation. One corridor opened into a chamber vast as a cathedral, where pillars rose like frozen lightning bolts. At the center stood a console of sorts, a crystalline structure hovering above the floor, rotating slowly in silence. The soldiers aimed their rifles. Kira stepped forward instead. The crystal responded instantly, flaring with light, casting patterns across the walls. They weren't random, they were images. Earth, stars, cities rising and falling. It was a history lesson, not from the past, but from the future. The crystal projection unfolded like a film reel, showing images in breathtaking clarity. Human cities towering with impossible architecture, floating skyships drifting among neon clouds. Then war. Fires ripping across continents, skies blackened with ash. Machines slaughtering men and men turning weapons on themselves. Reeves cursed under his breath, muttering propaganda. But Kira leaned closer, entranced. The projection wasn't random, it was sequential, like chapters in a story. The last images froze her blood. They showed Antarctica itself, the very cavern they now stood in. Only this time it wasn't buried in ice. It was a gleaming fortress, filled with people wearing uniforms, marked with a symbol she couldn't place. Humans, from the future, building this place as a vault, a time-locked message to their ancestors, a warning carved into metal, waiting to be uncovered when humanity stood again on the brink of collapse. The revelation fractured the group further. Scientists saw salvation, technology and knowledge sent back, through time to save humanity from its worst mistakes. Soldiers saw weapons that could tilt the balance of power for centuries. Reeves pressed a hand to his radio, whispering for extraction teams to move in, to secure the site. Kira confronted him, voice trembling with fury. "This isn't yours to seize," she said. "It was never meant for one nation. It was meant for all of us." Reeves's eyes narrowed. "And if we wait for politicians, we'll lose it to Moscow or Beijing." His soldiers raised rifles toward her colleagues. For a breathless moment, the cavern became a standoff of steel and fear. And then the crystal flared again, louder, brighter. As though reacting to their conflict, a single phrase scrolled across the hovering display. Written in perfect English, "Do not repeat our mistakes." Beyond the chamber, more doors opened as if sensing their presence. They entered a vault filled with machines slumbering in silence. Sleek drones shaped like birds, pods humming with frozen stasis. and weapons that didn't look like weapons at all, blades of light suspended in glass. Each object seemed designed for war and survival alike. The scientists cataloged feverishly while soldiers eyed the arsenal with greedy precision. But the more they explored, the clearer it became that the vault wasn't designed to arm them. It was designed to warn them. Every object bore damage, scars of use, shattered plating, scorch marks. These weren't blueprints of salvation. They were relics of desperation, sent backward in time when humanity had already failed. Kira's chest tightened as she realized the terrible truth. This wasn't a message of hope. It was an obituary. At the far end of the vault, they found a chamber unlike the others. A single stasis pod rested on a raised platform, glass frosted from within. Kira wiped the ice away and gasped. Inside lay a man, his face eerily familiar, though she couldn't say why. His chest did not rise, yet his body was perfectly preserved, as if only sleeping. A panel beside the pod flickered to life, displaying text in English. If you are reading this, we failed. But you still have a chance. Do not let ambition blind you. Unite or fall as we did. Reeves stared, jaw clenched. He's human, he muttered. He's us. Kira touched the glass, her breath shaking. Whoever he was, he had traveled further than anyone in history, across time itself just to leave this warning. The weight of it nearly crushed her. Then came the final revelation. The crystal flared again, projecting a sequence of numbers. At first, the scientists thought it was a data log. Then their blood ran cold. It wasn't history. It was a countdown. Days, hours, minutes ticking toward zero. What happens when it ends? Reeves demanded. No one had an answer. Kira's mind raced. Was it a timer for the vault itself? A mechanism set to seal forever? Or worse, was it a timer for the catastrophe the future had tried to warn them about? Every passing second felt heavier. The cavern pulsed with urgency, as if urging them to act, to choose. But how could they? Humanity had never agreed on anything without bloodshed, and now time itself was running out. The fragile alliance shattered. Reeves declared the vault under military control, ordering his men to seize the data and secure the pod. Scientists resisted, shouting, some physically blocking the consoles. Guns were raised, fingers trembled on triggers. Kira screamed for calm, but her voice was drowned by the hum of the spire rising to a deafening pitch. The crystal flickered violently, showing not images but possibilities, branching timelines where soldiers fired, where scientists fled, where the vault collapsed in flames. Each outcome ended in darkness. Reeves barked orders, his face a mask of iron. If we don't take control, someone else will. His words hung like a sentence. Humanity's greatest warning was about to become its first casualty. The first shot shattered the silence. A soldier's rifle cracked, echoing like thunder through the metal halls. Chaos erupted. Scientists ducked, equipment toppled, sparks showered from ricochets. Kira dove for cover, her ears ringing. The spire shrieked in response, its glow flaring into blinding radiance. The countdown accelerated, numbers ticking faster, seconds bleeding away. Machines stirred in their cradles, lights flickering awake, drones humming like hornets. The vault was no longer dormant. It was alive, reacting to the violence it had predicted. Kira crawled toward the pod, desperate to shield it, as if saving that frozen man could save them all. Reeves shouted orders no one could hear over the storm of sound and fury. The cavern itself seemed to tremble, as though the ice above would collapse and bury them all for eternity. And then everything stopped. The lights cut to black. The hum silenced. Even the screams and gunfire faded into nothing. The crystal hovered in the dark, glowing faintly one last time. A single message burned across its surface. You are the last hope. Then the countdown struck zero. Instead of explosion or collapse, there was only silence. Soldiers lowered their rifles, shaking. Scientists clutched each other in terror. Reeves's face was pale, sweat dripping down his temple. Kira staggered to her feet, staring at the crystal. It wasn't a bomb, she whispered. It was a test. The vault had shown them the future. It had shown them the cost of failure. And now it waited silently for them to decide what came next. Outside, the Antarctic wind still howled, indifferent to what had unfolded below. The vault remained lit faintly, but the machines went dark again, sleeping. The stasis pod hummed softly, its occupant unchanged. Reeves holstered his weapon, avoiding Kira's eyes. No one spoke. The message lingered heavier than any bullet. Do not repeat our mistakes. They had been given a choice. One humanity had failed before, and this time the choice wasn't centuries away. It was now. Kira exhaled, her chest tight. She knew the war above between nations was already heating. But down here, beneath miles of ice, they had seen what waited at the end of that road. The frozen sky had cracked open, and through it, the future had stared back. When they finally emerged from the cavern, blinking under pale Antarctic sun, the world seemed unbearably fragile. The ice stretched endless, but Kira no longer saw it as wilderness. She saw it as a tombstone for futures that had already died. Reeves spoke little, issuing clipped orders to pack the camp, to transmit only fragments of what they'd found. But Kira knew the truth couldn't be buried. She had seen the projection, the wars, the collapse. She had read the words burned into the crystal. You are the last hope. It wasn't just a warning. It was a plea. And it was meant for everyone, not just the few who had walked beneath the frozen sky. That night, as snow drifted around her tent, Kira sat with her notebook, sketching the signal's patterns one last time. The pulse still echoed faintly in the air, like a heart that refused to die. She thought of the man in the pod, sleeping forever, having traveled across time to deliver a message. He had sacrificed everything to give them a chance. But what if humanity ignored it? What if Reeves buried it and politicians twisted it into weapons? Her hands shook as she wrote in the margins, "We can still change. We have to." The frozen sky had given them a second chance. Whether humanity deserved it was another question entirely. Kira looked up at the stars above the endless ice, her breath crystallizing in the night. Somewhere out there, perhaps in a future already lost, humanity had fallen. But here, in this fragile moment, they had been given a choice, a warning wrapped in ice, a voice whispering across centuries, unite or fall. And maybe, just maybe, the world would listen. But the question remained, would we?